Over the next few decades, the metaverse will become immensely more advanced and integrated in our daily lives. Some people think the metaverse is just a hype, others believe it to be the greatest evolution of the internet. Together with the sharpest minds in this space, we are going to explore the future of the metaverse. We want to understand the impacts of this new world, and in this show, we will find the answers. Welcome to Metaverse Mentors.
Well, good morning here from the Netherlands and good afternoon from Australia, Andrew. Thank you for joining Metaverse Mentors.
No
Yeah,
problem.
pleasure to
Nice to
have
be
you.
here.
We are going to talk about a topic I'm extremely passionate about. Unfortunately, you have a wealth of experience in it. I suppose more than 20 years in education. And yeah, I've been burning to ask you some questions about it and also the combination, because at Metaverse Mentors, we obviously talk about not only generic and societal themes, but also how that ties into the metaverse. But perhaps before we dive into the metaverse and what the possibilities and barriers are in education, could you walk us a bit through your background and how that came about to what you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. Yeah, my name is Andrew Wright. I'm a technology specialist, I guess. I'm a teacher as well and an educator. And I've been teaching, they make me feel old now. So I've been teaching for 23 years, and 11 of those have been in one-to-one classrooms with iPads or some form of technology. And yeah, and so from that, I've just been ticking along in the classroom, and I've been passionate about education for a long time, and just seeing the fact that there needs to be a change, there needs to be something happening, and it's sort of very slow. Education tends to turn like a super tanker, and it's very hard to get any traction with change. But yeah, then I think COVID came along, and at that point, I was sort of before that I was going all over the world, sort of working with schools and implementing technology and talking about technology, and then it just all ground to a halt, and we were all Zoom teaching, and we were all locked down, and it was just crazy days. And I realized then I was watching, I was just saying earlier on, I was watching students, the clever students who on Zoom had filmed little clips of themselves just sort of slowly nodding like that. And I realized that this is just not happening. Nothing was going on with Zoom teaching. So I looked for something different and found, I don't know, like the concept of the virtual world, and started to develop what's known as the hybrid classroom model, where we have physical classrooms and virtual classrooms together. And for the last year, and since the COVID pandemic, we've been sort of I say we, it's just me and the dog. I've been working on that to try and create something that encourages students to re-engage and to be present in the learning, and that's where the metaverse and the teaching come together in these virtual worlds, and the EDU metaverse I've created hopefully
Well, you
will facilitate that.
thanks
So
for
that's
that
where we are now.
background, and you make it sound like it's super easy to, yeah, just create a virtual world with dog in the house and every and everything. So I
Yeah,
definitely.
um, I can talk about the process. Yeah, I was just trying to encourage people to have a go, but yeah, there's obviously a little bit more to just. It didn't just appear. I sort of during lockdown, like had that moment of like, I said to you earlier on, I just bought a dartboard, and I was just thinking, why have I bought a dartboard? What am I doing with myself? Like I'm just sat here waiting for something to happen, waiting for it all to open up, and then that's when I realized I had to be a bit more proactive, and began to learn Blender and taught myself how to, sort of do some 3D modeling and stuff like that. And that, alongside the sort of education background and having the ability to put content into those worlds, was I think what probably made it better in that sense. So yeah, it's a labor of
Yeah,
love, put
I
it
can
that way.
really appreciate that you took that initiative. I think there's definitely opportunity for other educators and teachers to innovate
100%,
there as
100%.
well. Speaking of education as a whole, I think you yeah, mainly spoke about primary education. Is that correct, or also secondary education?
Yeah, both. I mean, predominantly I work in the primary sector. I trained as a primary school teacher in the UK, and I work predominantly with primary schools here in Australia. Um, but everything that I've sort of built is upscalable right the way from kindy through to university level. So I've tried very hard. It's really the content that you put into the world is what's going to be key. So yeah, so that's
Okay,
upscalable. So, but predominantly I
yeah,
do
great
work with
that you're
primary
saying
schools.
that's upscalable up to universities because I think, yeah, the world moves incredibly fast, also technologically, also societally, and I'm interested in from all those 20 years experience or even more. What do you think are the key challenges are aside from this rapid evolvement of our world in education?
I think, like I said before, education is very slow. I feel like to change. We've been doing the same thing, and I talk about this before. That I mean, a lot of students are still learning as their grandparents would have learned, which I think is crazy. Like, and we sort of talk about education 1.0, which was how our grandparents learned when listening to the teacher. You're passively just taking on board stuff to where the point where we moved in towards education 2.0 relatively recently, which was being able to introduce technology, use the iPads, use computers, and then you took a bit more ownership of your learning until the point now where we are right on the cusp, I believe, of education 3.0, which is learn anywhere, anytime from anyone. And I think that virtual world, metaverse sort of, style of learning in the hybrid classroom model allows that to happen and facilitates that. But the key, I think the key stumbling areas is going to be traction. It's going to be, as soon as you see this, as soon as you're a teacher and you look at the engagement, the buy-in from the students, and what you can achieve by learning in this way, because what it's doing is sort of synchronizing what is how they are the sort of activities they're doing in the real world when they go home. Their worlds are a million miles an hour, and we come into school and we slam the brakes on and we say, "Listen to me, look at me," But this sort of style of teaching allows them to sort of re-engage and to be part of something that's really quite special. And I think once you see it, and once other teachers start to see it and see what's available and what can actually happen, it's a no-brainer that this is going to be is going to update, and it's already starting to become. We look at things that are implemented now into Zoom, and they're embedding them into sort of Microsoft Teams. So this metaverse world is starting to come into the mainstream sort of style of teaching. I think once people see it and you see the benefits of it, it's going to be hard to stop it. But the stumbling block is that there's also a lot of standardized testing. We're still living in a world where that's the be all and end of it. It's either literacy, numeracy, or bust. We don't tend to look at the fact that creativity is going to become, it's just already one of the biggest um, just prerequisites for most jobs that you're going to go into. We're going to have some element of creativity. So why is that not pushed further? No one's going to care what your NAPLAN results were when you get into the job market. No one cares. It's crazy. And I find that there's so much pressure put on teachers to test, 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 and to teach to test, and to just, it's just all wrong. And I think we need to sort of reevaluate what our priorities are in education. And that's going to take some doing, I think, because we're very ingrained globally in an education system that's creaking at
It
the
sounds
seams
like I hear
every single
myself thinking when I hear you speaking,
You
and
must be a
Andrew.
visionary too, my
Yeah,
friend. I think you just have to look at the way things are going at the moment to realize. And I feel personally that maybe we missed a trick with COVID, because COVID was the almost the catalyst for change that we just needed so badly. And I fear, and working with teachers and as a teacher, that we just went back to the way we'd done things, because we were just like, we're back. We can go back into the classroom. Whereas I feel and I hope that we didn't miss a trick, because that was the point, I think, where we could start to embed these new technologies and we could sort of move forward. But I think maybe we're going to have to go back and breathe and then push forward again. So it's a battle. I'm telling you, it's a
yeah.
battle to try and. It feels like a war sometimes, that you're trying to make this change and you're on the front lines, and you're sort of combating all these different reasons why not. And I'm saying to you, yeah, why not? Let's
Yeah,
do
it's
it.
like
Let's keep moving forward.
you're alone
Rather than
shouting in an
go
echo
back.
chamber, but getting no Also, what do you think the needs to happen? What events or which actors should take action to, yeah, to accelerate that change? Because you already mentioned education generically is moving fairly slow. So what events do you think need to take place, and which actors? Perhaps it shouldn't come from the government. I don't know. Perhaps it should come from people like yourselves who start something, yeah, just autonomously, or yeah, what do you see there?
I mean, yeah, ultimately, I think it's got to come from the decision makers, right? Because we can sort of push, and teachers will push from the ground up. But it's the decision makers that are going to have to say, yeah,
Hmm.
you know, we're going to buy into this. Holistically, we're going to buy into this. We're going to buy into this whole school. We're going to buy into it. We're not going to do it piecemeal. So what tends to happen is that you have somebody like myself will be doing it in isolation, you know, in a school, and then the other staff are like, oh, well, that's interesting, but I couldn't really do that. And that's the point where you need the decision makers to say, yeah, yeah, you are doing this. We're all going to be doing this. I think until that happens, it's all done in isolation and it's all sort of piecemeal. And I think it needs to, the decision makers from above need to see it, need to actually see it working. They need to be involved in it too, and also to sort of push it out because one person can't do it. One person can just, and you tend to look at that person who is innovative and who is pushing the envelope, and then you sort of like go, oh, it's not. Let's go back to what's safe. And I think it's going to come down to being a risk taker. And there is no risk. It's just a perceived risk. Oh, we can't do this because of security reasons. We can't do this because we're worried about this. We're worried about that. And you become safe. And that's not to say that anything's going to happen because we've been using these virtual worlds for months, and you know it's locked down to a domain, and it's sort of, you know, password protected, and only students with that email address can get in. So it's a perception as well. I think we need to change perceptions, and this is where I don't know how to do that. And I think it's about changing perceptions that it isn't scary, it's not terrifying. If you can click on a web link, you know, we went through that with Zoom, and it was like Zoom was a new thing, and it was like, oh, this is just going to be a nightmare. And then like suddenly now we're progressing to the next level and the next level, and it's like it is just a jump, but it's not a big jump. But I think the perceived gap between what is doable and what is safe is perceived to be incredibly difficult. And I think it's not. It's just, and the way to round that maybe is just to keep getting the message out, and keep showing people. Like today, I had we had 30 students all out on the reef. I've got a reef world, and there's a, I don't know if you've seen it. There's a out on the reef. There's all these different activities they can do when they come in, and I'm always looking for marine biologists to come and help out and experts to come into these worlds. But there's a boat on the world, and it just sat there. It's just a model, but the buy-in from the students is amazing because they were all on the back of the boat, and I've got a photograph of me driving the boat with 30 kids on the back of it. You know, and then people say when you go home, and parents say, "Oh, I heard you were out on a boat," or "How I heard you were doing this," and because they're going home, the kids, and they're saying, "Get when you normally say to kids, what's the thing they say to you? What did you do at school today? Nothing." You know, you get that from your kids, and it's like, but now what they're saying, "Oh, look, you can, mum and dad, you come and have a look at this because the world is open." And after school, they're bringing their parents in, and they're showing their parents what they're doing, and that I think is the way to get traction. But I just don't know how to push that out and to upscale that to. I need to get in front of people, I guess, like this, and this is why I do podcasts like this because hopefully it's getting the message out there that this is not some sort of mystical potion that I'm pouring in, and you know, it's not anything difficult. It's just a web link, and you know, we can just showcase this and show you how easy it is to do it. It's not magic. There's no magic here. It's just being a risk taker. So in a roundabout way, I think teachers are going to need to be risk takers, and decision makers are going to have to start making some decisions about whether they want to push forward and leverage this technology to, in no sense of hyperbole here, but to transform learning for these kids because it's unbelievable. I'm telling you now that the things that we get through by just that hook of engagement
Yeah, it's some
is
next
just
level
unbelievable.
engagement. Imagine that you can talk to Einstein, for example, and
Yeah.
hear his thinking and see what he is saying, or instead of learning what happened in 1995 in a particular area, actually experiencing that area and seeing what has happened. And I think what you're saying is completely accurate. Like a lot of the current education is still relying on the industrial model, a lot of knowledge memorization, rote learning, very boring, and we are also seeing it's getting increasingly harder to concentrate with all the distractions we are having. But if we are having these virtual reality glasses, one, we don't have a room, mental capacity or visibility to be simultaneously on our phones. So we are also completely immersed at that time. Exactly, we are not working two-dimensionally. We are three-dimensionally or like 360 degrees. So yeah, I cannot wait for that to happen. You also mentioned with regards to testing that educators are a lot working towards those milestones. Okay, we are going to train these kids or students like 8 weeks, and then we have this milestone moment where we can evaluate how far they progress, which I think is utterly unrepresentative for the qualities, because if you're working in a company or you as a teacher, how frequently do you have to take a test, and to what extent does the result of your test
I
say
know, I know.
how qualified you are for the job? But what I'm interested in, what would you see in the future of education in terms of testing or no testing at all? What should be the substitute or the other proposal there?
No testing at all. You're talking crazy. Look, I have my own thoughts on that, and it probably is probably quite extreme in terms of what I think needs to happen or what I think should happen. And then I realized that the how do I put this diplomatically? There is a certain level of expectations for teachers to have achieved a certain. Um, it's really difficult because the testing side of stuff does give you sort of like a baseline, but to be testing to the point where you are making kids sick with worry, that is not beneficial to anybody in any scope of reality. To be so worried about a test that no one's going to give a flying fig about in about 5 6 years time is to me insane. And there are better things that we could be doing, but I mean that's probably quite out there way of looking at it. It's like, oh, you've got to have testing, you've got to have this, you've got to have that. Maybe just not so much. Maybe we push what's really going to become important in the future job market, and we align what is the real world and education and start to bring them closer together, because at the moment they seem to be here. Education is sort of not coming into or not sort of aligning itself with the world that these students are living in, and it's moving at a million miles an hour, and school isn't,
Do you have ideas
education
for
isn't.
how to do that? Because
Um,
I totally agree. I went through the entire journey from primary school to master degree at university, and honestly, I don't hope my employee is my company is going to watch, but I forgot like probably 90% of what I learned there. So yeah, how effective is it?
it's that's the question, and I think, and a lot of it is parental mindset as well. So depending on culture as well, so there's a lot of things you've got to take into consideration. I mean, there are some cultures that uh, really think rote learning and having a tutor and spending money on all of these things is the be all and end of it. And who am I to sort of argue with that? But I feel like we there's just a lot of stuff that we're trying to cram into their heads that they're not ever going to use. And I genuinely feel that. I look at the syllabus and I'm like, what are we doing that for? And I guess a lot of teachers feel like that, but it's there are certain things you've got to get the numeracy and the literacy. Like, I'm not even arguing with that. That's a prerequisite. That's got to happen. But there are times like you just said, and I look back thinking, what the heck am I learning? Why am I even teaching this? Or why am I learning this? As a student, I was like, hey, sir, why am I learning this? That's not going to be much use to me. And guess what? I mean, I'm so old that my teacher, I will never forget, my teacher said to me, Oi, right, do you think you're going to be walking around with a calculator in your pocket forever? And I was like, no, sir. And now I'm like, you got more power in your fingertips with a phone or whatever than the entire Apollo mission had. That's the world we're living in. So yes, sir, I am going to be walking around with a massive calculator in my hand all the time. and a camera and a movie making thing, and and all of these things that we should be leveraging. I'm not saying you have to get your phone out in your classroom. That's ridiculous. But like, you've got a camera there, and your iPad, all of these things that we could be using to make education more engaging. Listen, I'll tell you what it comes down to, and I believe two things: relevance and engagement. If you don't have those two things, you can talk as much as you want as a teacher, as an educator, and it's going to get maybe 20% go into their little minds. But if you're making it relevant and it's engaging, you can hit those targets because they're into it, they're invested, and they're in the game, skin in the game. So they're basically you've got them. If you
And I
can do
think there
that,
you are mentioning an extremely
you can.
relevant point as well, because we are always obliged to follow specific topics like mathematics, history, physics. But why can we not, as learners, if I like mathematics completely, then I start to follow that. But why do I need to be obliged to also learn this topic which I completely uninterested in, so I can develop my strengths there, right? So that's
Yeah,
where it comes back to the relevance for me as a student and the engagement, because if I'm not interested in it, then it's not relevant for me, it's not fun for you to teach for me. So yeah, there's some dynamics there.
yeah, that's yeah, 100%. I mean, and so junior schools obviously a little bit different because you've got to get the basics, you've got to get the foundations and stuff, which is imperative, and that's not even an argument.
What are the
That's
basics
got to
there that
happen.
you need to,
I like your numeracy, your basic numeracy, and your literacy, reading, writing, all of that stuff to a level
but
where
even
you are,
that you could contest,
proficient in
Andrew,
those
because
things.
I see a development,
I wouldn't possibly dream of contesting that on a
well,
public forum, but yeah, yeah, of course you
I
can.
always
Yeah,
joke to
100%
my
agree with
parents
you. But
because we
like,
had always we had this couple of kids, and the same happened to my little brother when he started out in education. Those kids who got homeschooled before they entered primary school, and they already knew all the numbers, all the entire they acquired the entire literacy, and for them it was basically okay. Why should I just start in group 1 or 2? I can just skip that and start. So apparently, if you are allowed to make fun at home or have fun at home and study, but of course your parents need to have the capacity to do that as well. It's not something that's self-evident, but
yeah,
I see tendencies there happening as well on homeschooling to acquire those skills.
well, let's face it, right? If you and in 10 years ago, I watched Sir Ken Robinson's Changing the Educational
Yeah,
Paradigm.
yeah,
If you haven't seen
I
that, if
saw
anybody
it. It
hasn't
was
seen that
mind
video, I'll
blowing, but
start
unfortunately,
recommending
I
it.
saw. Yeah,
It's still so relevant today. It's 10 years old, right? It's 10 years old. It's way older than that, actually. It's a lot older than that. But I watched that, and that changed my life as a teacher. And that's when I realized I need to be doing something different. But he talks then about how school is on that industrial revolution sort of model of bells and all this happening, and you start work. And I remember as a teacher, I'm working on something. The bell would go, right, put it all away. We've got to start something different. Move on. The bell would go, oh, sorry, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. We're just moving sideways. But he talks then about students going through school on their date of manufacture. So what he's talking about there is that if you are 7 years old, you are in this class, regardless of your ability. Doesn't matter whether you're a genius or you just don't get anything, whatever. But you're in class on your date of manufacture, and that is it. That to me doesn't seem. It just seems crazy that we would just because you get the ability range within classes is huge. You've got absolutely like such a wide array of students, and you as a teacher are expected to manage all of this. Now, is the answer that we look at not having that in terms of like I don't know. It's so
it's
ingrained
funny that you're
in our education
mentioning
system
that,
globally that
because it's actually utterly counterintuitive to everything we are seeing in daily life. If we are looking at the football team, it gets selected based on how good you are playing. Not
yeah,
we are not combining all players. If we are looking
yeah,
at
yeah, yeah.
yeah, if we
Yes,
are
it
looking
is a
at
bit of a weird
companies and we
one.
need developers, we are obviously not caring if someone is 14 years old and it's a brilliant coder, then he gets hired. So yeah, that's interesting. But on the same token,
it's an interesting. School and education is always really interesting. And I think there is an element of we always go back to the way it's been done. This is the way we did it. This is the way it's always been done. There does need to be a shake up. You just have to spend a day in a classroom to realize that we need to be shaking things up, and whether that be through technology or whatever the answer is. I mean, some schools, it would be really nice. Like I look at Montessori schools and all those sort of different type of schools. Some are really out there, some are very restrictive. So what? Just maybe finding something that's in the it balances all of those things, and then we could go move on. But I think it's going to be a tough sell. I think it's become very, very ingrained and very sort of hard to shift. And I think it's going to take some time. And we're moving slowly. Like already the technology in schools is sort of really picking up.
Yeah, interested to see what's
Yeah,
happening
it's
there.
just
But I
slow
think
turning.
we have done some good challenge digging in the education landscape. Let's look to the future and perhaps let's look sideways. Have you
Okay.
seen, Andrew, perhaps globally some examples which you got inspired by in education, like perhaps countries or particular schools that you're like, okay, these are like leading the way in terms of interactive education?
Yeah, I think yeah. I mean, I look at. I think globally, it's not really moved that far. Finland, I probably everybody talks about Finland as doing away with standardized testing, and it is interesting. And I think I don't know, like I think probably Finland has the is probably the most advanced in terms of
What is it that they are
doing it the
doing
right
differently?
way.
I read some articles.
I think you don't go to school until you're a certain age, like 7, I think it is. I'm not quite sure. I mean, they go to school later. They don't have so much standardized testing if they have any at all. It's just a different way of doing it. But I think you'd speak to teachers and someone would just be absolutely horrified by that. Like, what? I can't, you must be joking. But I think it's mindset, isn't it? Like it's like that's the way they've done it, but we couldn't possibly do that. I think we're very constrained in education. It's going to be very hard to break out. Yeah, but I think probably Finland. I don't really. I'll be totally honest with you. I don't really follow. I'm still too busy trying to
Yeah.
get it moving here than to worry about what everybody else is doing. But yeah, I think pretty Finland is, and I think they just have a better model. I think than the way we do stuff. But I would, if it was up to me, I'd rewrite the
Okay,
entire curriculum.
let's
I don't
kind
know.
of no, let's
No.
simulate that, and let's say you would have infinite funding, and we say, okay, Andrew, you can build the education that you are envisioning. What would that look like? Or perhaps it's a bit of a comprehensive thesis, but
Okay. Well, the first of that, a lot of that money I'd spend on paying the actual
oh wow,
teachers what they
yeah.
deserve. And that's let's start distributing that money because I'll tell you what, and I'll tell you here in the public forum, they're just underpaid and they're overworked. So I would start by fixing that. Would be the first thing. We're hemorrhaging teachers, not for no reason. We're hemorrhaging teachers because they're not respected, they don't get paid enough, and they do an incredible job. And I'm telling you that because you see it on the front line, and it is a front line. There's a reason why we're
But
losing so many, and we
if
need
I
to
can
start
tie
growing.
into that,
So my
sorry for
first thing would
interrupting,
be,
Andrew. But if we look at
hmm,
the ancient eras where you had people from Greece, from Rome, and also I think in former Iran, the Persian area, teacher was a very respectable job. It was like almost one
yeah,
of the higher jobs on the societal ladder, teaching philosophy and everything.
yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting to see how that has shifted throughout the decades.
I don't know. I don't actually know why. Because I tell you what, if you don't think they work hard, and not you, but generally, if the general public don't think they work hard, come into the classroom for a day and just watch what these people have got to put up with. I mean, you're not just doing one. You've got just one child. You've got 30 children, and in some classes, 34 or bigger. You're dealing with your nursemaid, doctor, psychologist, you first aider, all of these things. You just taking on they're just taking on multiple hats. So yeah, so my first thing would be to pay them properly and then get more people into the profession, and the right people. Those that are actually, it's understanding. It's actually not about looking backwards to where we've been or what we've been doing. It's about looking forward to where these kids are going. I think if you understand where these students are going to be going, then you see how imperative it is that we actually get this technology into the use. And then I think we need more teachers coming in. We need more male teachers, and that's not anything to say that,
Is that pertaining
female
to
teachers aren't
primary
listening. That's
education or
nothing to do with it.
education as a whole?
Definitely. We just need, yeah, we need more male teachers. I think we just need more teachers generally. But I think I work predominantly with female teachers, and the ones that I work with are incredible. But I definitely think we need more
What
male
what what
teachers
could
and we
be the
need more
reason
male role models to
of
this.
that? This asymmetry.
It's just perception of the. I think it's perception. I mean, being totally honest with you, it's just perception. I think like people think, oh, you're going into teaching. Oh. It's like, well, why would you do that? It's rubbish pay, and basically, you're dealing with other people's kids all day long. But it's just probably one of the most rewarding professions that you could ever go into. And I mean, I wouldn't have done it for 23 years if I wasn't passionate about it. But I think we definitely we need more people coming in. We need younger people coming in, and we need to change the perception of teachers that are not just overworked, overstressed, underpaid, because that's the perception at the moment. I think it seems to be. So my first, like you say, to go back to your original answer, is basically to have just build up teachers and sort of get them back into the profession, and then train them. I think without training, you can sort of, even go back to the grassroots level when they start to come to university and they start learning about all of the stuff they have to do and all that sort of stuff, but to start get the technology embedded there. And so when they come straight from university onto prac, they're already prepped and they're all ready to go. And I think we need to maybe look at the way we're training our young teachers to sort of become a little bit more technically
Yeah,
proficient.
speaking about technical proficiency, I read a lot about AI and also from my study background, and I think there's also some opportunities and applications that we can possibly see in the future in the education landscape. Because earlier in this podcast, you also mentioned that creativity, that's the key differentiator nowadays and also in the future, because everything that can get repeated or is repetitive in some sense can be automated by an AI, but creativity, empathy, those things an AI will not have. So what I could, for example, envision is the content that that you are receiving from a teacher. Usually, you could be in the future receiving that from an avatar in the metaverse, for example, which is fueled or engendered by AI. But I don't know if you have thought about it, but I don't. I personally don't think that would disrupt teachers or eliminate the uses of teachers. Perhaps it will change the role. But yeah, what's your view there for the future with these technologies emerging? Do you have any thoughts about it?
Mm. I don't think an AI teacher is going to pick you up when you fall over. It's not going to emotionally support you. It's not going to be there when you bang your head against the table. Yeah, that human interaction is key, and I don't think that'll ever change. I think AI teaching might
Yeah,
sit on the
because
side
you
of
mentioned
the real
that
classroom, and again,
educators
that's
have
when
a lot
people
of
are, yeah,
tasks to do. So is there
hybrid
perhaps,
classroom.
do you see perhaps an opportunity where you can say, okay, now we have this technology, so we can implement it in a way that makes it easier for us as teachers to focus on the things that really matter and let AI do the other stuff?
Yeah, yeah. I think anything that supports a teacher in the classroom but actually works towards um, getting the students to where they need to be. Any tools that we could use have got to be useful, right? I mean, again, it's going to come down to training. Are we going to just like throw it out there? Or are we going to actually train our teachers to use this? But and I think we've got to see technology as a toolkit. And it's got to be a toolkit. If you're using technology and it's stressing the teachers out, then it's no more use than a chocolate teapot. Technology has to be given to the teachers and the students and be used in a way that helps not only the students learn but takes the pressure off the teacher. If you're running technology in your school and it's stressing everybody out, you might as well just pull it away because it becomes more of a hindrance than
Yeah,
actual than
yeah,
a, than a
yeah, completely. It's such a fascinating topic. I can really see compared to other podcasts that I am kind of more engaged because I'm more experienced into it and more read into it. Normally, it's more asking questions. So, sorry if I've been.
uh, I'm just pleased that you haven't nodded off because
Oh,
most people
no,
just
no, no,
nod
no,
off.
absolutely not, absolutely not. But on the same token, this perhaps has distracted us from the topic that Metaverse Mentors is about, which is yeah,
Yeah,
which
we just been into teacher, didn't we? Look, I'll be honest, I tend to go for the I'm very passionate about education and teachers' welfare and looking up. And because the ones I see, the ones I work with, are just some of the most incredible people. All of the schools I've worked at, everybody is so dedicated, so passionate, so just giving. And I think it's about time, and I'll say it on here, that it's about time that they got rewarded for that, and people started seeing what these guys, women and men do, these teachers do, and they should be sort of
definitely,
applauded for that. And my hope with the metaverse is that this will go some way towards helping. I mean, the teachers that I work with and we're actually using this with are all saying the same thing. Oh wow, it's like we could go on and do this, we could go on and do that, and then what you want is them to springboard their own ideas off the back of something that I built. So that's hopefully where we're going with that. But yeah, this might lead
yes,
into your
yes,
next question
absolutely.
about the
Because
metaverse.
earlier you mentioned that yeah, you were encountered by COVID, sitting at home, having these smart kids making
Playing
gifts, being
darts.
attending or
Yeah.
not attending the classes, and then kind of
Yeah.
retrained yourself to build some cool virtual worlds. Yeah, can you walk us through that? How difficult, how easy how accessible is that to do something like that? Because I haven't
Yeah.
heard any similar stories yet of a teacher doing that actually.
No, I think what was really interesting when I started was I had no idea. I play video games. I love video games, and I always look at the world, and you just become passively accepting of these worlds. You're like, oh, cool graphics, blah 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 blah. And then I thought to myself, if like gamification has been around, of education has been around for ages. Like kids play Minecraft, they're all massive into Roblox and all the other ones and stuff like that. And then I started to think, what if we could get like worlds that had educational were just based around educational content? It'd be cool if I could find something like that, and I couldn't. And I thought, well, someone said to me, just build it. Like you just, one of the kids said, just why don't you just try building it? I was like, what do you mean building it? No, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm too old. Blah 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 blah. And then I went away and I thought, hang on a second. And I met a child a while back who had taught themselves coding off of was just on YouTube, and he was brilliant. And he said to me, "Oh, if I could do it, anybody can do it." And I was like, "Oh, let's have a look." So I went and had a look, and I started researching it a little bit, and then I put feelers out to other people. I said, "What's the best way of doing this?" And they said, "Oh, use Blender." And if you've ever used Blender, listen, if you make Blender or you're the person that made Blender, bless you. But honestly, I started using it and it was the most complicated. For somebody who's got an old brain like me to learn, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I started learning Blender and I found this guy who was helping me and he's a developer. And I got onto Discord and I was starting asking for help. Oh, how do you do this? How do you make a window? How do you do this? How do you do that? And I started getting help from people. And eventually I started to talk to him, so I had enough that I started building these worlds. But he said something to me right at the very beginning that will always stick with me. I said to him, I want to use Blender to start making these worlds. And this guy said, be
Oh,
careful. Oh, so sorry. Be careful, he said, because you'll be stepping over the dead husks of all of the people that have come
oh
before you.
wow.
I was like, what? And then I started doing it and I realized what he was talking about. And it is quite a complicated program, but so to go back to my original, to get off on a tangent again, it is possible. So I taught myself how to do that, how to start creating worlds and bring things in and all that sort of stuff and make textures and everything. I mean, I'm not by any stretch of the
Yeah, if you
imagination.
need to
Oh,
pick up, no
sorry.
problem.
No, I don't.
Oh,
I just need to
okay.
switch it off, but it's out of reach. Um, it's all good. Yeah, so the Blender side of stuff, and I sort of began to build into that and create things that became a little better. And I was always able to try it out with the students, and I say, "What do you think?" And they would test it, and they'd say that's rubbish, that needs to come out, and that needs to go back in. So I had a captive audience who were really, really keen on sort of what are you making this week, and can we try it? Um, so I guess in a way, if this is like the old adage, isn't it? If I can do it, literally anybody can do it. I mean, it is doable, and my advice would be maybe I got a
Mm-hmm.
Udemy
Yeah.
course, one of those courses. It was on sale for like $12. I watched that. I watched YouTube. I put out expressions of interest to help. I said, "There's anybody out there that can help me on news groups and forums," and just from there, and then you sort of pick up enough
Is it, by the
to
way,
be able to
is it
start
then, is
creating.
it
So
a lot
it's
of
it's
designing, like sculpting those materials for those virtual worlds, or is there also an element of really coding and, yeah,
No, there's no coding. I wouldn't have a clue how to code it. I mean, to be totally honest with you, I started ideas, and then like you can go to places like Sketchfab, and you can find models that you can put into your world. There's a lot of people that have already done stuff for you that you can use. You can find commercial stuff that you can use. Other people's work that they've said, oh yeah, free to use, just borrow it. So a lot of times, go and find a model and bring that in. Then there are other times like there's one of the worlds which is like a Nautilus submarine, and I'll be honest with you, man, it's just a tube. It's like a tube, and I've just filled it with like to make it look like a submarine. And then I wrapped a photosphere around the outside and put some sonar pings. But that's the one world where the kids are like, oh, that's so amazing. And I'm like, this is literally just a big
yeah, yeah,
tube.
yeah.
You know that, right? The kids, but it's about creating the illusion of being underwater, and that takes a little bit of time, but it's definitely doable. So yeah, I just made a little tube, and then I wrapped it with a photosphere and added some models to make it look like it was the Nautilus. And weirdly, that one took the shortest amount of time, and that's the one the students love the most. They're just like, let's go in the submarine. And I'm like, fine, and we'll do our
Yeah.
lessons under the water. So the illusion is there, and
What
and,
are
and
some
it's
cool
really
cool
interesting.
examples aside from the tube that you have built and, yeah, that you have done with your students?
The probably the one that one we've got. So what I've tried to do is link the worlds together. So, for example, we had one where we were going to an island. So the students were going to go to an island. I've made this island that was for grid references. So they were looking to dig up treasure on an island. So on their iPads, they had the map and they had the grid references. Then they could physically take that and go to the island as an avatar and move around. Before that, I'd said to them, "We'll get on the plane." So I've got this one again. It's just like a tube. It looks like they're up in the air, and the stewardess and the sounders of the airplane in the background. They all jump on. Everybody goes and sits on a seat. So we've got all of these kids sat on the plane, and then you come out as a teacher, as your avatar, and you say, "Hey, we're going to go here, and this is what we're going to do," and then you do the chalk and talk on the plane, and then the plane lands on the island, and they all jump out and they move to another world, and then they start moving around in that virtual world. So what I'm trying to do and what seems to work is that sense of immersion. It's all about them getting in and sort of becoming invested in the activity. We flew here. You went on a metal tube, but we flew here. We landed on this island. There's treasure, and it's that hook. And honestly, that hook is just unbelievable. And so from that, we could fill the worlds with anything: math, science, geography. And to go back to your original question, a lot of the stuff that you said that you were learning was pretty much irrelevant. What I'm trying to do is embed science, maths, literacy all into one world, so that when they come out the other side of it, they've got no idea that that's what they've just done, but they remember everything we've shown them, and they're like, oh yeah, that was science. Oh, that was maths too. Oh, and we did the literacy. So it's all wrapped and bundled into one thing. So at the moment there are 35 worlds. I can't even believe I made 35 worlds, but there are 35 worlds, and that just we just move around those worlds and in bringing the educational content and yeah, the feedback from the students and the
That's
teachers is just
that's amazing, and I think
seems to really love
first
it.
of foremost you should get a promotion for building and doing all this stuff.
It's hard to promote yourself
Yeah,
when you're self-employed. So I will take your
yeah,
advice and I'll give
you
myself a
you
promotion.
absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, people think, oh, EDU Metaverse, and I mean, I teach it is just myself as a teacher, and EDU Metaverse is just something I built. But there's no big company behind it. I'd probably be sat on a beach in some tropical paradise if I owned, the company that my own company that was sort of a big company. But yeah,
Yeah, who
everything I
knows how
built was
the
just
future will
from
unfold? And I will also ask this
people.
as we are nearing the end, where people can find iTeacher and what you are doing. But to tie into the example you
Yeah,
painted, to what extent do you think this is also applicable for secondary school or university? Because I remember when I was a kid, I watched a lot of anime stuff and yeah, cartoons like. But when I grew older, I don't know. I can still watch it, and I have some friends who still love to watch it. In fact, but to what extent do you think it's transferable for to learn in university, for example, in those virtual worlds?
yeah. I mean, it'll come down to content. It's like, what's the content that you put in it? The virtual worlds. I mean, I've got a world where we learn about democracy. So I teach year 6 at the moment, and so they come in. They all come in as a class, and they're able to create their own village with their own rule set and their own. They elect a mayor, and they have all of these problems they have to solve. They create a national anthem. They create a coat of arms. But that world could go to secondary school, and then the content that you put in there is curriculum based. So you'd bring in secondary content. If you're at university level, you bring in university content. So the worlds really um, facilitate that sort of expansion to other year groups and stuff like that. But it's going to come down to the teachers and the lecturers putting their own content in there. I mean, I work quite closely with Verbella. I try very hard not to mention names and people. Verbella have a campus. You can go to university on a virtual campus, and in this day and age, that's quite amazing in a post-pandemic world. To be able to go to university in a campus that holds 3,000 people, however many people it is, and just interact that way. But I think what's really important is that educators need to remember, it will come down to the content that you put into these worlds, and you fill them with
Yeah,
whatever you want
super
to
cool. I
teach.
also saw parallel to Blender Unreal Engine and how realistic it is, and Unreal Engine 5 came
Oh
out,
man,
and
I'm not even
it's
starting that.
yeah, it's
That might
startling
be a bridge too far.
how realistic it is. But yeah, super interesting that you're taking this initiative and leading the way with that. First, yeah, as we're nearing the end, where can people find you who want to learn more about this stuff, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, you can EDU Metaverse, you can Google that. I mean, it's just www.edumetaverse.com.au. And from there, you can go into the showroom, which has got 35 worlds. You can sort of have a look at it. I teach a training, that's just myself, and you're more than welcome to have a look at that website and see some of the stuff we're doing. I'm on Twitter. EDU Metaverse is on Twitter, Instagram, all of those. And I'm always putting stuff up there and showing the work that I'm doing, and you can follow me on there. And it'd be great
Awesome,
to have some
awesome.
more
I will
followers.
definitely share the details in the caption. Is there perhaps something, Andrew, that you would like to close off with, or something we haven't covered or we haven't talked about that you're like, okay, wait, this is also quite essential or interesting that I just want to share, or
I think, look, and your listeners, wherever they are, if it's something that they feel like my advice to you is if you're watching this as an educator, and I would assume that maybe you are, then be the change is the one thing I can say. Be the change. You can do it. No one's going to come along and do it for you. It's going to be up to people like you and me who are going to be that change and to facilitate that change. And that's something that you got to look inside yourself and think, let's just do it. Just do it. Take the risk, the perceived risk, because it really isn't, and just go for it. And just what we do as educators, it's not about us. It's not about looking at, I can't really do that. It's about them, the students, and giving them a 21st century education and doing something special. And I think it's going to come down to the fact that, you just got to jump. Technology in schools is like a train going through a station. If you are stood on the platform, so you think, I'm never going to get on. So people like myself hopefully slow that train down long enough for you to jump on board. Once you're on board, we're away. So everybody slow down the train just enough for